In the far reaches of the galaxy, near a swirling mass of cosmic dust that glowed with violet luminescence, a structure of staggering proportions orbited a red giant star. This was the headquarters of what most civilizations call the Galactic Assembly, though a few more cynical sorts preferred less flattering names. The pit of perpetual bickering, the interstellar etiquette circus, and so on. It was an opulent place, as if every species competing for influence had tried to outdo each other in architectural flamboyance. The result was an eccentric kaleidoscope of twisting towers, floating platforms, and walkways that shimmered with gravitational trickery. Delegates from over 30 different species gathered here to negotiate trade routes, discuss resource rights, and produce endless reams of legal documents that, if stacked together, might have rivaled the height of a small moon. Humans were the most recent arrivals to this cosmic carnival. Their first official delegation had shown up in a ship that might have qualified as advanced by the standards of pre-FTL societies, but was decidedly quaint compared to the sleek marvels that zipped around the Assembly's orbit. The human craft, named the SS Aurora, was chunkier, had visible seams where parts had been retrofitted, and carried an aesthetic best described as utilitarian with an optimistic paint job. When the Aurora approached the docking ring, a few curious onlookers from older, more established species watched from the observation decks. They were hoping for some grand entrance, perhaps a sign of either technological brilliance or, conversely, pitiful ineptitude they could gossip about. What they got was something in between. The humans carefully glided into position, signaled polite docking requests, and extended the standard electromagnetic handshake in an awkward but earnest manner. In the minds of the cosmic elite, it was tantamount to showing up at a hyper-formal gala wearing clean but modest attire. Respectable, polite, yet undeniably out of place among those who dripped with centuries of refined power. Inside the Assembly's Grand Hall, the humans introduced themselves. They spoke of Earth, its diverse cultures, its staggering variety of music and art, and 1,000 or so ways humanity could ferment grains and fruits to create alcoholic beverages, an offhand remark that got more attention than one might expect. A few delegates from species with centuries of viniculture tradition perked up. Others, particularly from worlds where any form of intoxication was taboo, made a show of feigned disinterest. As the humans concluded their brief introduction, they added a warm invitation. Anyone interested in cultural exchange, we'd be happy to share samples. Responsibly, of course. For the Zilliran hegemony, the reigning superpower of the Galactic Assembly, this was all faintly amusing. The Zillarans were a tall, elegant species with a penchant for multi-layered ceremonial garb and a proud, almost theatrical manner of speech. They believed themselves the rightful leaders of galactic civilization. After all, they had established hyperlane routes, built star bases that gleamed like cosmic jewels, and codified many of the very regulations that underpinned assembly operations. Their haughty stance had been honed over centuries of success. Lesser species either gave them a wide berth or willingly became client states, carefully abiding by Zilliran regulations in exchange for protection and scraps of advanced tech. And now these humans had arrived, brimming with naive optimism. A single glance at the Aurora convinced the Zilliran envoy that the Earthlings posed no credible threat, technologically or otherwise. Of course, the humans had no illusions about where they stood in the pecking order. They knew the Zillarans, along with several other advanced civilizations, viewed them as cosmic toddlers. Humankind's cunning, earned from centuries of conflict and near self-destruction on Earth, lay in understanding the power of first impressions. Rather than show hostility or arrogance, they arrived humble and friendly. Rather than push for immediate recognition, they extended a handshake. It was the perfect strategy to lull an empire accustomed to seeing new species grovel. Before long, the pleasantries gave way to the usual labyrinth of paperwork. The humans found themselves signing treaties, memoranda, and clauses that seemed straightforward enough on the surface. Meanwhile, the Zilliran hegemony quietly inserted addendums that would place Earth and its fledgling colonies under a series of development guidelines. These guidelines, if one read them carefully, prevented the humans from exploiting key resources without Zilleran oversight. But the humans, apparently oblivious, just smiled and signed away, occasionally asking a harmless question or two that elicited smug answers from the Zilleran delegates. Days turned into weeks. The Aurora's crew remained stationed at the Assembly headquarters, exploring the colossal facility, exchanging cultural tidbits with curious delegates from other species. Humans quickly garnered a reputation for aggressive sociability, as one Zilleran official put it. They shared jokes, stories, and even a few raucous drinking sessions. Almost everyone, even the stoic reptilian Garoks, found something oddly compelling about the humans' way of forging friendships. But not all was sunshine and laughter. The Zilleran hegemony began testing humanity's boundaries, sometimes in unsubtle ways. One typical incident happened in the Assembly's dining concourse, a vast, ring-shaped area floating under a shimmering energy dome. Zilleran representatives happened to seat the human delegation near the service entrances, where the clattering of dishware and the hum of food dispensers constantly interrupted conversation. The humans didn't complain. They just talked louder, refusing to break their smiles. Next, there were pointed remarks about Earth's primitiveness. Humans still use ballistic weaponry. Their ships relied heavily on reaction mass. Unthinkable. The Zillerans chuckled, and the humans shrugged it off. The Zillerans, of course, had a more systematic approach to subjugation. Their initial move, always, was to probe a new species' territory. In the case of Earth, that meant sending a flotilla of trade scouts to the outer colonies in the Incel system, where humans had begun extracting raw materials from asteroids. Under the pretense of verifying compliance with interstellar safety codes, Zilleran cruisers showed up unannounced, scanning everything in sight, intimidating local miners, and seizing shipments for quality checks. When human representatives at the Assembly voiced concern, the Zilleran ambassadors responded with perplexed innocence. We're merely ensuring the high standards of the hegemony are met. Surely, you welcome our assistance. Humanity lodged formal protests. Zilleran officials gave them the runaround with procedural jargon. Days stretched on, and crucial shipments vanished into Zilleran hold bays. The humans kept their composure, filing complaint after complaint as mandated by the labyrinthine code of the Assembly. Their unflappable patience gave the Zillerans pause. Usually, a lesser species either lashed out in frustration, providing the hegemony a pretext for crushing them militarily, or submitted entirely to Zilleran administrative control. But the humans did neither. They simply kept following the rules, as if they believed fairness could be found amid the volumes of regulations that the Zillerans themselves had written. Other species watched this dance with varied reactions. The Shuro Collective, known for their complex hive minds, reasoned that humans would either capitulate soon or provoke Zilleran wrath. The VYX, an amphibious race with a history of being conquered multiple times, quietly rooted for the newcomers while publicly maintaining the facade of neutrality. A few older civilizations, like the reclusive Elder Korax, observed from afar, their ancient eyes seeing deeper than most. They noted subtle discrepancies in human behavior. The discrepancy between earnest smiles and methodical data collection, between modest requests for mediation and the relentless stealth scans of Zilleran territories. The Korax had seen enough wars to sense that humans might not be as simple as they appeared. Eventually, tension took a darker turn. On a remote outpost in the Helios Fringe, where humans were cataloging exotic plant life for potential medical breakthroughs, an armed Zilleran vessel performed a so-called military exercise. Orbital bombardment accidentally struck the outpost. 6 human researchers died. The Zillerans expressed mild regret, explaining that the area was listed as a training corridor, so the presence of any research facility was a clear violation of established guidelines. The humans responded with calm, but firm demands for an independent investigation and restitution. The Zillerans feigned sympathy, offered token compensation, and carried on as if they'd done nothing wrong. The dead scientists were, in Zilleran eyes, unfortunate footnotes on a spreadsheet of cosmic realpolitik. In private meeting rooms, High above the swirling lights of the Assembly's central promenade, the human representatives held hushed conferences. The anguish on their faces was genuine. 6 lives lost in a needless act of aggression. But frustration was not the only emotion swirling in the air. Under that frustration lay a cold resolve. Every time a door opened, letting a Zilloran functionary breeze past, the humans resumed their facade of courtesy. Once alone, however, they would compare data, parse communication intercepts, and carefully map out the vulnerabilities in Zilloran command protocols. Beneath the surface, a methodical plan took shape. One day, a high-level human official requested a final hearing with the Assembly to address the Helios Fringe incident. The official's hair was streaked with gray, and faint lines of exhaustion etched his cheeks. Yet his posture exuded calm determination. Taking the podium in the Assembly's great circular chamber, he waited for the hum of small talk to subside. A hush fell, and the official spoke in precise, measured tones. We have attempted every form of redress through diplomatic channels. We have cooperated with your guidelines. We have endured intimidation, resource confiscation, and now we have lost human lives to unprovoked aggression. We request, for the last time, a fair investigation and a commitment to abide by the fundamental principles of interspecies respect. For a moment, there was silence. Then the chief Zilloran ambassador let out a carefully calculated sigh. We regret your losses. However, the hegemony cannot be held responsible for accidents that occur in authorized training zones. Furthermore, if humans persist in constructing facilities in questionable locations, the burden of risk falls on them. She concluded with a rhetorical flourish that sent her ceremonial sleeves billowing. That is simply how order is maintained in this galaxy. The official clenched his jaw. He inhaled slowly, as if battling to keep his composure. Then, without raising his voice, he said, "Understood." His gaze swept the chamber. In that case, consider our formal diplomatic phase concluded. With that single line, delivered in an eerily quiet monotone, the human delegation rose and walked out. No dramatic exit, no shouted threats. Just a small, orderly group departing a vast arena where dozens of curious eyes tracked their movements. A few silent seconds followed before the Assembly resumed its usual humdrum of trade disputes and legislative debates, as if the humans' quiet proclamation hardly mattered. But the next day, a mysterious wave of anomalies rippled across Zilloran space. Communication relays malfunctioned. Routine supply routes halted when NAV computers glitched. Automated defense drones at key starbases reported fleeting intrusion attempts on their network cores. At first, Zilloran officials chalked it up to common cosmic interference, but their intelligence division pressed for deeper investigation. Some mid-level analysts grew concerned about the pattern. Senior officers, however, reminded them that humanity possessed barely functional FDL drives and had yet to demonstrate any advanced AI capabilities. Thus, the situation was deemed low threat, likely ephemeral. What the Zilloran hegemony failed to realize was that the humans had spent years setting the groundwork. They had feigned ignorance of advanced protocols, letting Zilloran inspectors assume Earth's systems were an open book. Meanwhile, concealed in the heart of Earth's best research labs, entire teams had been dissecting stolen snippets of Zilloran code and hardware. Every new inspection or safety check at a human mining site had been an opportunity for covert observation. Every clumsy scanning device on the Aurora was, in fact, an infiltration tool siphoning data. What the humans lacked in generational hypertech, they made up for with cunning, collaboration, and a flair for cryptography honed through centuries of digital warfare on their own home planet. A small group within Earth's unified military command had directed these operations, codenamed Veiled Quill. The notion behind the name: we'll write the story of their downfall under their noses, and they'll never notice the hand that moves the quill. The plan was to avoid direct confrontation. Humans recognized that Zilloran weaponry outclassed them in raw power. But if the Zillarans could be systematically disarmed by sabotage, if their warships could be turned against them, Then Earth would never have to match their guns with bigger guns. Instead of building dreadnoughts the size of moons, humanity built infiltration systems that nested like parasites in the hegemony's digital infrastructure. The final impetus came from the Helios Fringe tragedy. When the Zillerans brushed aside the loss of human lives, Earth's leaders decided they had enough moral justification to proceed with Phase 2 of Veiled Quill. Within hours of the humans' quiet departure from the assembly chamber, hidden signals raced across quantum-entangled satellites that Earth had scattered in strategic orbits. These signals triggered timed commands in unsuspecting Zilleran computer networks. Doors began to unlock, files started to replicate themselves, engines warmed up with no command input. It was like flipping the on switch of an elaborate device assembled over years, all in broad daylight. On the capital world of the hegemony, Xyla Prime, a brilliant cityscape stretched across continents, dominated by spires of shimmering black metal that housed the nerve centers of Zilleran governance. Late one evening, in the opulent administrative palace, the high conclave of Zilleran military officials was enjoying a lavish banquet. Crystal chandeliers floated mid-air, rotating gently, casting prismatic reflections onto a polished floor. The scene exuded a smug complacency that had grown over centuries of unchallenged authority. Then the lights flickered. For a fraction of a second, the floating chandeliers dipped dangerously close to the floor, and everyone froze. Moments later, the lights stabilized. A few guests exchanged uneasy glances. The palace's central AI quickly issued an apology in the local Zilleran dialect. Energy fluctuation. Systems nominal. Reassured, the officials resumed their feasting, though a faint tension clung to the air. If they had paused to dig deeper, they might have noticed that some of the palace's mainframe systems had quietly rerouted command hierarchies, but centuries of arrogance dulled that sense of caution. Simultaneously, on 3 frontier worlds, entire fleets of Zilleran vessels went dark. The ships were left drifting in silent orbits around their respective starbases. Panic spread among local crews who tried to regain manual control, only to discover their consoles no longer responded. In some locations, the ships turned of their own accord, weapons pivoting at bizarre angles or locking onto friendly signals. Alarms blared. Officers roared in confusion. And still, the galaxy at large had no clue what was unfolding across Zilleran territory that night. By the time dawn broke on Xyla Prime, interstellar communications were in chaos. The hegemony's leadership scrambled to identify the cause, suspecting sabotage, yet refusing to believe that a so-called Category 3 emergent power, like humanity, could orchestrate such a far-reaching infiltration. But the evidence was indisputable, hammered home by a series of cryptic messages that appeared on encrypted Zilleran channels. Each message, in perfect Zilleran script, read, "We are done being nice." Even then, many within the hegemony's upper echelons laughed it off as a bluff. Done being nice? So what? Humans lacked capital ships the size of mountain ranges. They lacked planet-cracking cannons that had been rumored to exist in Zilleran vaults for generations. A few lines of malicious code wouldn't threaten the largest empire in the galaxy, so they reasoned. Perhaps the humans had caused some localized disruptions, but the hegemony's true power was absolute, or so they believed. Their arrogance cracked when the first wave of human vessels materialized near the Xyla Prime orbital ring. Zilleran orbital sensors had detected nothing until the moment the ships uncloaked. The largest craft with a fraction of the size of a Zilleran dreadnought, yet bristled with energy signatures that the monitors couldn't decipher. Smaller ships flitted around it, each radiating jamming frequencies that blocked Zilleran countermeasures. Defense platforms tried to lock on and fired half a dozen bursts of searing plasma, only to watch them spiral into the void as if rerouted by unseen hands. That's when a transmission started. On every official Zilleran channel, from the grand broadcasting towers to the security frequencies, a calm human voice spoke in measured Zilleran. "Surrender your weapons. Evacuate all military installations. Civilians will not be harmed. This is an enforced disarmament, not an extermination. Cooperate, and you will live in peace. The voice repeated with unwavering confidence, followed by a set of coordinates where Zilloran officers were instructed to move their vessels for collection and decommissioning. The High Conclave erupted in fury. Proclamations of war soared through the palace corridors. They demanded immediate mobilization of the hegemony's unstoppable armadas. But that unstoppable force had already ground to a halt. One by one, star bases, battleships, and capital vessels have been locked down, their AIs hijacked, and their weapon systems overridden. Some tried to engage manual controls, only to find entire subsystems physically reconfigured by infiltrators. Others realized their ships had been quietly sabotaged for months. Even if they tried to fight back, they were effectively swinging at shadows. A few loyalists to the hegemony attempted desperate countermeasures. They brought out old, outdated vessels from museums, machines that had never been upgraded with modern digital frameworks, and so presumably lay outside the infiltration's reach. These antiques launched with bravado. Yet they quickly found themselves confronting a new wave of human ships that dwarfed them in speed and maneuverability. Within minutes, those relics were disabled as well, their systems overloaded by directed energy pulses that neutralized electronics. The humans did not demolish them with raw firepower. They simply deactivated them, leaving the shells of once proud warships drifting in space. Throughout the galaxy, news of this stunning reversal spread at light speed. Species that had spent generations groveling before the Zillarans witnessed the unveiling of humanity's hidden might. But this might took an unexpected form. It was surgical, precise, and aimed purely at disarmament. Civilian sectors on Zillaran worlds remained untouched. Power grids and life support on major colonies stayed online. There were no city-leveling bombardments, no vengeful slaughters. It was perhaps the most chilling display of force the galaxy had ever witnessed. For the first time, many species understood that true power was not just raw destructive capacity. It was also control, the ability to disable, to infiltrate, to manipulate your enemy's entire infrastructure without firing a single massive warhead. On the ground, Zillaran citizens peered skyward at the flickering contrails of ships locked in silent struggle. Soldiers who had once marched in triumphant parades laid down their arms, terrified of an enemy that seemed omnipresent. Some cried out that the gods had forsaken them. Others cursed their leaders for underestimating these strange, primitive humans. In a last-ditch effort, the High Conclave broadcast a plea to other advanced species. Unite with us to repel the human threat before they turn their sights on you. But the message fell flat. The galaxy saw how humans refrained from attacking civilian populations, how they methodically neutralized military assets with minimal casualties. Most species, having suffered centuries of Zillaran exploitation, hesitated to risk their own fleets against a force that had just neutralized the greatest empire in known space, especially one that showed restraint far beyond anything the hegemony had ever offered. In the midst of the chaos, the human flagship established a direct comlink to the palace. The High Conclave gathered in a grand chamber lined with portraits of ancient Zillaran conquerors, each painting a testament to centuries of victory. A holographic figure, clearly human, appeared before them. She wore an understated uniform, her expression calm but resolute. "I am representing Earth's unified military command," she said in perfect Zillaran. "We've offered you every chance at equitable coexistence. We tried diplomacy, we tried appeals to fairness. You scoffed, you belittled, you killed. Now you face the consequences." The High Conclave's leading official, robed in shimmering black, sputtered with indignation. "You dare to hold the hegemony hostage? You would destroy thousands of years of progress for what? Vengeance." The human's gaze didn't flicker. "We are not destroying your worlds. We could have burned your fleets from the sky, but we chose not to. This is not vengeance. It is termination of your imperial dominion. You will no longer use your technological advantage to subjugate others. We're ensuring that advantage is taken away." Over the next few hours, humans orchestrated a sweeping shutdown of Zilloran military capabilities. Automated drones converged on stockpiles of advanced weaponry, securing them under tight guard. Planet by planet, the hegemony's once invincible armies were disarmed. Some skirmishes flared, but they ended swiftly, with minimal bloodshed, mostly thanks to the crippling infiltration that paralyzed Zilloran command structures. In a single day, centuries of tyrannical rule collapsed into a swirling heap of forced compliance. The rest of the galaxy looked on in awe. Many suspected humanity would annihilate Zilloran worlds, seeking revenge for their dead researchers or to claim new territory. Yet the humans did something few expected. They merely demanded a capitulation of military power, the dismantling of exploitation apparatus, and immediate liberation of any client states. The hegemony's leaders, faced with the total shutdown of their forces, had no choice but to agree. In the subsequent meeting at the Galactic Assembly, one that drew every representative from the furthest star systems, Zilloran delegates were conspicuously subdued. Gone were the grand robes and the customary entrance fanfare. They arrived in simple attire, heads lowered. The entire chamber thrummed with subdued anticipation. Then the human delegation entered, prompting delegates to look up from their seats. These were not the same unassuming explorers who first approached with talk of cultural exchange. They walked with quiet confidence, radiating the knowledge that they had just upended the galactic order. When it came time to speak, the lead human took the podium. Her voice carried the calm certainty of someone who had weighed all moral implications. We did not come here to dominate the galaxy. We came in search of cooperation and friendship. But we would not stand idle while our people were attacked, our resources stolen, our efforts to achieve peaceful progress mocked at every turn. So we took a different path, one we hoped we would never have to use. Now, the Zilloran hegemony stands disarmed. We do not demand tributes, nor do we seek to enslave them. But we will insist on a new structure of governance in which no single empire can unilaterally terrorize others. A hush followed. Even the venerable elder Corax, whose luminous eyes reflected millennia of lived history, inclined its elongated neck in silent acknowledgement. The stories it had told of ancient wars and cyclical rises and falls of mighty civilizations now had a new chapter. The unexpected ascendancy of humans, who had grown weary of playing by rigged rules. A new treaty was unfurled, drawn up by human legal experts in consultation with willing species from across the galaxy. It declared the immediate dissolution of the Zilloran monopoly on advanced weaponry, mandated fair trade agreements, and established a council to enforce these provisions. Failure to comply would result in the same infiltration that had brought down the hegemony's fleets. There was no need for planet-killing superweapons if you could simply turn them off. Zilloran delegates had no bargaining chip. Thus, with trembling limbs and heavy hearts, they signed. It was the end of an era, the final note in a symphony of hubris. Some wept openly, others stared at the ground, their sense of cultural identity in ruins. Humanity extended a measured kindness by allowing the Zillarans to retain governance of their homeworld, provided they adhered to the new rules. It was not mercy in the eyes of some, more like a moral principle that innocents should not be punished collectively. Even the once glorious empire, now humiliated, would be allowed a future if it chose to coexist rather than dominate. In the days that followed, repairs began. Zilloran civilian systems were restored to full functionality, ensuring no famine or ecological disaster would befall them. Humans helped in these efforts, showing a level of concern that baffled many species. They destroyed the Zilloran war machine, whispered the rumor mill, yet they're helping to rebuild their infrastructure. Some races found it admirable. Others considered it foolish. But every observer took note. Humans were not repeating the cycle of conquerors enthralling the conquered. They were breaking it. Back on Earth, in the unified military command bunker deep beneath the planet's largest mountain range, the atmosphere was tense with relief. They had just executed the most ambitious infiltration in recorded galactic history. Despite the success, This was no moment for triumphant parades. A few generals might have dreamed of huge medals pinned to uniforms, but the civilian leadership insisted on a low-profile approach. After all, Earth's bigger challenge loomed: to integrate peacefully into the new order they had effectively shaped. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, smaller powers rejoiced in the Zilloran downfall. The VYX declared a week-long festival to celebrate the turning of tides. The Shuro Collective reorganized their trade routes, freed from the hegemony's oppressive tariffs. Worlds that had been forced to pay tribute or surrender resources found themselves breathing the exhilarating air of independence. Yet underlying this jubilation was a tremor of caution. If humans could do this to the Zillarans, who was to say they couldn't do it to everyone else? Humans, for their part, made overtures of goodwill to the newly liberated species. They proposed technology exchanges, offered to assist with infrastructure, and reaffirmed that their interests lay in stable, peaceful development. Most accepted with cautious optimism. A few remained suspicious. The legacy of imperialism was not so easily dispelled by one altruistic gesture. But as time passed, a new phrase slipped into the lexicons of interstellar diplomacy: remember the humans. It was both a warning and an acknowledgement. Arrogance could be undone by the most unassuming newcomer, especially when that newcomer had learned from centuries of conflict how to bide its time, gather knowledge, and strike with devastating precision. Thus, the day came to be known as the Reversal. For centuries to come, historians would debate whether the humans were justified in dismantling the Zillaran Empire so ruthlessly. Some would condemn them for playing judge, jury, and executioner on a galactic scale. Others would argue that the Empire had perpetrated countless atrocities, and that a swift takedown was not only justified but necessary. Many would see the operation as a testament to humanity's capacity for cunning, proof that their niceness was never a lack of strength, but a deliberate choice. And there, in the Galactic Assembly's Central Hall, which had once witnessed Zillarans parading their cultural superiority, now stood a Reform Council. The seating arrangement was altered, placing humans not at the center, since they had no wish to dominate these proceedings, but in a position of equal footing with every other species. Each representative had a chance to speak, and all were given the right to argue for or against proposals without the overshadowing presence of an absolute tyrant. It wasn't a perfect system, politics never are, but it was a marked improvement from the old order that had suppressed dissent through fear and intimidation. From the perspective of Earth's people, it felt surreal that only a few years prior, humanity had just barely cracked the code of interstellar travel. They had ventured forth with starry eyes, hoping to find friends among the stars. In a way, they did find some. They also found bullies and warmongers who believed might made right. In the end, humanity proved that cunning and solidarity could level even the mightiest empire. The phrase, "We are done being nice," became legendary, repeated in historical accounts as the moment everything changed. School children across the galaxy would someday recite it in their lessons on power dynamics. Leaders would remind each other of the cautionary tale. Never assume that politeness and humility imply weakness. In an unremarkable corridor of the assembly station, away from the grand halls and political theatrics, a young human officer stood gazing out a window. She watched as a Zillaran cruiser, now stripped of lethal weaponry, docked at a cargo bay to deliver supplies for collaborative research. The once fearsome silhouette had become a humble transport vessel, a sign that not all transformations lead to ruin. Sometimes they lead to rebirth. Footsteps approached. An older Zillaran scientist, no longer wearing the elaborate vestments of the Empire, paused by the same window. For a moment, the pair regarded each other in silence. Then he bowed his head slightly. He struggled for words. "We never thought it would come to this. My people were so sure we knew better than everyone else." The human officer nodded. "Sometimes, it takes a shock to the system to change course. Maybe now, we'll all learn to cooperate." They said nothing more. Both stared out into the cosmic tapestry, illuminated by drifting starlight. There, in the quiet hush of the corridor, two individuals from once opposing civilizations shared a fragile moment of mutual understanding. Neither could predict what future complexities would arise in a galaxy reshaped by the downfall of the hegemony. But they stood on the threshold of that new era, reflecting on everything that had led them there. One empire's arrogance, one species' refusal to remain victims, and the humbling lesson that even the mightiest can be undone when those they underestimate finally say, "Enough is enough." After a while, the Zilloran scientist departed, shoulders bent under the weight of his people's history. The human officer lingered, quietly determined. She recalled the lost researchers, the intimidation, all the slights and diplomatic stonewalls that had pushed humanity down this path. It still hurt to think of the fatalities that sparked the final phase of their plan. Even in victory, there were scars. Yet the officer took a measure of solace in knowing they had spared countless lives. It would have been so easy, so tempting, to retaliate with the same cruelty once shown to them. But the humans had chosen otherwise, proving that restraint could be more potent than brute force. Throughout the station's labyrinth of corridors, as well as across the newly reformed star systems, that message took root. Governments convened to rewrite old treaties. Entities that had harbored centuries of resentment against the Zillarans stepped forward, demanding restitution, collaboration, or assistance, sometimes all three. Task forces formed to track down hidden caches of Zillaran weaponry to ensure no rogue element might reignite conflict. Humans joined these teams, guiding them through the infiltration techniques used to neutralize dangerous tech. The synergy that arose from these cooperative ventures marked the dawn of a different kind of galaxy, one with a chance, albeit slim, to break the cycles of oppression that had marred so many civilizations. Rumors persisted that some extremist Zillaran factions plotted revenge. Occasionally, sabotage attempts on Earth's newly revealed starships occurred, though none succeeded. The infiltration software remained a powerful deterrent, a ghost haunting the galaxy's networks, reminding everyone that a second reversal could happen to any power that got too big for its cosmic boots. Ultimately, these rumors served as cautionary tales. Trust had to be earned, not coerced. The humans, surprisingly, were open to forging alliances, even with former enemies, so long as the playing field remained level. In time, daily life across the galaxy resumed a semblance of normalcy. Markets reopened, cultural festivals returned, and research on new frontiers began anew. Yet, if one listened closely, they could hear the subtle shift in people's attitudes. The way delegates spoke more politely, the way old rivalries softened, and the subtle deference shown to humans not because they demanded it, but because they'd proven capable of devastating retaliation, yet refrained from it. The specter of "what if they do it to us" lingered in every strategic calculation, tempered by the question, but will they? They had the chance, and they didn't. On Earth, the populace grappled with mixed emotions. Pride in their successful stand coexisted with sadness at the necessity of it all. Nonetheless, humanity pressed on with the mission that had brought them to the stars: exploration, curiosity, and a desire to learn from other worlds. They had shown their claws, but it was never about building a new empire. It was about ensuring no empire, Zillaran or otherwise, could ever push them around again. So ended the story of how the galaxy learned what happens when humans decide they're done being nice. A lesson etched in the ashes of the hegemony's once untouchable fleets and echoed in every treaty and handshake that followed. The Watchers among the Elder Corax would memorialize it as a turning point in the cosmic tapestry, a moment where a once minor species reshaped the order of the stars. Perhaps future centuries would witness further upheavals and new powers rising. But for now, at least, the galaxy had been reminded of an ancient truth, that no throne is too mighty to be overturned, and those who appear small and harmless might be the ones holding the sharpest blades, if they ever choose to use them.